break Mayor Tarina Boshoff for a presentation on Northwest Climate Risk and Vulnerability Assessment.
Can everyone hear me? Okay. And can I just check the people online? Can you hear me? I can see a thumbs up somewhere. There's a very big screen here, so I don't think I'll miss a thumb. But I don't see anything. They'll probably complain if there's no sound then. Good afternoon.
We can hear you.
Oh, good. Thank you. My name is Tarina Boshoff. I'm the Director for Environmental Policy Planning and Coordination in DDECT. And before I start, let me just greet our MEC and HOD in absentia, as well as the MMCs, if there are representatives from the House of Traditional Leaders and Khoisan leaders, and our colleagues from national departments, from the Northwest University. Ladies and gentlemen, and I hope all protocol is observed now. Today I want to discuss, I must point to that one. Should I keep it in or just press the arrow? Okay. I came across this phrase where it says, we are living on this planet as if we had another one to go to. Meaning that the way we are living, whether it's reckless or good or bad, if it's not there anymore, we think we can just go to another planet. But unfortunately, that's not the case. Whether we agree with climate change or not, it's happening. And there's science showing that it is increasing. It's becoming a big threat to the world globally. And we can choose to ignore it, but unfortunately, when you then eventually want to go to another planet, we will not find one. So I wanted us to start from this phrase, just to remind ourselves again, what do we mean when we talk about climate change? Sometimes it happens when there's a big rain event or a flood, and then people will say it's climate change. But we cannot say it's climate change when it's a once-off event. Climate change is a long-term shift in the weather patterns, in the temperatures. So we need to determine the long-term trends. Are we, in the long term, do we have different weather patterns and temperatures. And it's since the 1800s that human activities have been the main driver of climate change, primarily due to the burning of fossil fuels like coal, oil, and gas. And I wanted also to show you what the definition in our new Climate Change Act is on climate change. It says it's a change of climate that is attributed directly or indirectly to human activity that alters the composition of the global atmosphere, and that is in addition to natural climate variability observed over comparable time periods. Because we know that there are natural cycles of seasons that's changing, the climate that's changing. But due to human activities, it's in addition, there's a additional focus on the seasons and the weather patterns changing. Just a reminder, what mainly contributes to climate change is the greenhouse gas emissions that we get as a result of, on the left-hand side, you have your coal-generated electricity. I don't know if this pointer will come there. But on the left-hand side, where you see the smoke, the generation of electricity is the key contributor. The last IPCC report said 78% is contributed to generation of electricity. And there we also get GHG emissions due to agricultural practices, solid waste, transport, and other means of emitting fuels in the municipal areas. So that is just a quick reminder that I don't necessarily go into detail now. Can we read the later first? So we have done a climate risk and vulnerability assessment report already in 2021 for the province. It was with the support of our National Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment, which was through the German donor funding of GIZ. And this assessment considers the risks and vulnerabilities that we have in the province associated with climate change. It's a very important document that lays the foundation for the current draft climate change strategy implementation plan that we are having on the table. And in that assessment, we identified key hazards for Northwest, which I'll get into. So maybe before I continue, you will remember from the presentation that I saw from the National Department this morning. It was said that we will no longer do risk and vulnerability assessments in terms of the Climate Change Act. It's called the Needs and Response Assessment. So I am presenting what we have in the province, but it will be revised at the time when those national documents are ready. The hazards that are identified for Northwest is increased temperatures, rainfall variability, increased periods of drought, more intense storms and flooding. And you might wonder, why is this important? Does it really impact us? The matter of the fact is that, the fact of the matter, sorry, that was the other way around. The fact of the matter is that climate change is a multiplier. It's a threat multiplier of the threats that we already have. So if we were in ordinary circumstances were to have droughts, climate change now multiplies that effect. And it drives dangerous immediate risks like extreme weather and safety, rising sea levels, food and water insecurity, health crisis, economic disruption, biodiversity loss, and ecosystem collapse. This was taken from the CSIR document at that time, which was a representation of the annual average temperature from the period 1961 to 1990. And you can see that from the western side of the province, the dark red area, where we normally have the higher temperatures, then we move to the eastern side, southeastern side, where it's more orange, and then the lighter yellow. So the highest temperatures are in the west of the province, and it moves to the east more or less. There are bands, what you can see. Just to note that based on the more recent study that was done by Sunby and the University of Witwatersrand, they've used the baseline of 1981 to 2000. So there is a bit of a more updated determination of this, but it's more or less the same trend. I'm just presenting it as it is in the report currently. Then the projected changes at that time, where we still used the representative concentration pathways, it's RCP scenarios, which was the older way of predicting the future in terms of if we keep things going as it is, or if we make some mitigation actions, and if we don't do anything at all. But if we look at the worst scenario, then you'll see the red on the western side is becoming extremely red, 3.5 degrees, 3 to 3.5 degrees, that it will be higher moving to the eastern side of the province. So there is a new way now where how they predict the future scenarios. They are not using representative concentration pathways anymore, the RCPs. We are now using SSPs, which is called the shared socio-economic pathways. And the main difference is that these RCP scenarios was focused, the modeling was focused on the greenhouse gas emissions, looking only at that. But the new pathways, the SSPs that we are using, also consider the socio-economic impacts and policies that we have. So it's not only focusing on the greenhouse gas emissions. But as I say, there are actually similar trends, it's just a bit more refined. The annual average rainfall of the baseline, you'll see that on the western side there's less rainfall, and then it increases to the south and the east as a baseline. And according to the prediction that was done for the RCP scenario, the yellow means that the rainfall is getting, it's 0 to 100, it's less. And the orange is minus 100 to 0. So there is a general decrease in the rainfall, especially to the western side of the province and the northeastern, more or less. In the risk and vulnerability assessment, we then determined what are the key sectors in the province that would be exposed and are exposed to climate change. And these are the sectors: it's ecosystems, rural livelihoods, urban livelihoods, agriculture and farming, tourism, mining, water supply, energy supply, transport, human health, the disasters resulting from extreme weather, and waste management. And then we have determined what are the levels of concern for each of these sectors, looking at how sensitive these sectors are to climate change and how easily do they adapt, their adaptive capacity to climate change. And then we got these 7 sectors as being the key ones it's a high level of concern. The ecosystems, our rural livelihoods, water supply, transport, waste management, human health, and disasters resulting from extreme weather. So I'll just quickly touch on them that you can see what kind of outputs came from that study. And what I also want to highlight is we had stakeholder engagements when we did this assessment, and the adaptive capacity and sensitivity were taken from inputs that we received from the stakeholders, the way they see what's happening in the province and also the knowledge that they have of the province. In terms of ecosystem, the main key impacts that we saw was that the increased average temperature may lead to land degradation, and that would affect obviously the type of biodiversity that we have. The increased rainfall variability can lead to severe periods of drought and increased number of fire danger days. And I think in the Northwest, you will know that we frequently hear of fires, felt fires that's coming up. Deterioration of water quality may threaten aquatic ecosystems, which is also a key concern in this province. So it was felt that ecosystems, they are highly sensitive to climate change, and the adaptive capacity is very low to medium because there is limited human and financial resources to implement the environmental management and biodiversity plans that we have. We can implement some of it, but it's not always enough for what we actually need to do. Rural livelihoods, the increased temperatures disrupt our natural resources, leading to increased levels of food insecurity, which is a challenge that we need to look at. The water quality, the decrease in water quality and quantity, which affects health of rural communities. And then there's an increased prevalence of extreme weather events, leading to loss of life and livelihoods. Again, the rural livelihoods are highly sensitive to climate change, and their adaptive capacity is very low because rural communities do not have access to resources such as knowledge and finances always to respond to the effects of climate change. In terms of water supply, which is another level of high concern, the changes in rainfall patterns result in changes in spatial and geographic distribution of water. Increasing temperatures and rainfall variability reduces the water availability and results in many households experiencing a high degree of water stress. So the sensitivity is very high on our water sources and water supply, and the adaptive capacity is low because the Northwest is a water scarce province, we all know that, and there is poor management of water resources in the province, especially also because we rely a lot on groundwater and the management of our water supply system that must improve. Transportation is another high concern sector because high rainfall can increase erosion of dirt roads and landslides, causing the road blockages. The roads and bridges are buckling and cracking in warmer temperatures. Disruption of transportation infrastructure by climate change related extreme weather events. So our infrastructure is very sensitive because not a lot of our infrastructure in the province is climate resilient. And we need to start effecting this climate resilient response into our designing and planning of our roads. Waste management. The intense rainfall events wash waste into streams, rivers, and stormwater systems, increasing blockages in these systems and distributing waste into the aquatic environment. And then we also get damage to the waste management facilities and disruption of the services as a result of the weather events. So this sector is highly sensitive, and the adaptive capacity is low because there's a lack of financial and human resources to adequately manage waste in the province. Human health is another high-level concern sector because drought can lead to dehydration, lowered food security, and an increase in waterborne disease. Flood events, on the other hand, can cause effluent overflow, which can cause an increase in waterborne disease. And then the increase in temperatures can result in heat stress, causing dehydration and heat strokes. So the sensitivity was felt it's medium, and the adaptive capacity is also medium because the vulnerable members of communities will be more susceptible to climate change effects, especially in rural areas. Disasters, we spoke about disasters resulting from extreme weather, where we have floods, droughts, wildfires, heat waves that we're getting more frequently in the province. So these things are highly sensitive, and our adaptive capacity is medium because although we have disaster management plans in place in the province, there still needs to be a bit of more coordination among the relevant departments and sectors that must be involved. So the rest of these sectors, it's of medium concern, agriculture and farming. So I won't go in detail. I'll just mention a few. For example, on agriculture and farming, there's a decreased water supply for irrigation, and the adaptive capacity is medium because it's a water-intensive activity, and farmers that have access to resources will be able to implement farming practices, but not everyone might have that. Tourism is also of medium concern because increased temperatures can discourage activity-based tourism, especially your eco-tourism kind of activities where it's outside and then people will experience heat stress, and it requires water availability of some activities. So the tourism sector is highly sensitive for climate change. And at that stage when we did the study, we still had the effect of COVID, and it was then, there was a slow response to climate change in terms of the capacity they had to adapt. Mining, changes in temperature and rainfall patterns affect the water availability for mining. We all know that mines need water for their operations. So they are highly sensitive to the impacts of climate change, and they are medium in terms of adaptive capacity because of the technological and financial resources that they do have to adapt. Urban livelihoods, also of medium concern. There's decreased water supply that can lead to disruption to urban livelihoods, and they are low to medium in terms of adaptive capacity because urban livelihoods have access to basic services. However, the water scarcity and poor management within municipalities compromises this. You know that we always see in the news all the strikes and demonstrations because of lack of services that we have. Energy supply is also of medium concern. Disruptions in energy supply is as a result of damage to the energy supply infrastructure during these extreme weather events. there can be an increased demand for air conditioning in warmer temperatures, which has a demand on your energy. And so the sensitivity of the energy sector is high to climate change. Their adaptive capacity is medium to high. I have a message here on my screen that says it will be turned off in 1 minute. So if you can just look at that, please. You must press a button. So, yeah, they are medium to high in terms of adaptive capacity. Then we can ask the question, so how do government respond then to these challenges? As I indicated, the risks and vulnerabilities that we identified in this Northwest Climate Risk and Vulnerability Assessment were used to inform the current strategy that we're working on, the Northwest Climate Change Strategy and Implementation Plan. So we need to make sure that the stakeholders are involved, that we address the issues that we've identified, and then my screen goes to the different sectors. Then we also need to ensure compliance with the Climate Change Act. We've had a presentation this morning from the National Department on what are the requirements and especially for provinces and municipalities. We need to ensure that we get our systems in place for that. We continually need to conduct capacity building workshops and awareness raising campaigns. There was a question raised this morning about, or an input made on how we need to take it to the lower level, to the communities. So there was a study done by the CSIR, and which was the other institution, but they did it in collaboration with the National Department. And it was found that less than 50%, I think 49% or something, of citizens knows really what climate change is about, which is very alarming because it shows that we still have a lot of work to do as government to create awareness and build capacity on what are we dealing with, what is climate change. And then we need cooperative governance to build a climate resilient province. We need to work together in the different spheres of government. We need to work together with the private sector. We need to form partnerships, and because we cannot work in silos, then we will not really achieve much. The next steps then. The Climate Change Needs and Response Assessments and Implementation Plan by MECs contemplated in Section 17 of the Climate Change Act are dependent upon the development and gazetting of the National Adaptation Strategy. You heard this morning that this Section 17, which requires provinces and municipalities to develop the response plans and implementation plans, those sections are not enacted yet. They have been deferred for later implementation. And the main reason is that the National Adaptation Strategy must first come into place. And then after that has been published, then within a year's time, we have to do a needs and response assessment. And within 2 years of that needs and response assessment, we must do the implementation plan. So as soon as the National Adaptation Strategy has been published, we will need to review what we now have as the Risk and Vulnerability Assessment, but it will be changed into a Needs and Response Assessment. DFFE, you also heard, is currently busy with the technical guidelines on how we do our needs and response assessments and the implementation plans. So when we develop review hours, it must be in line with those guidelines. And yeah, that's just that that's still waiting for us in the future. So in closing, responding to climate change is a new mandate in our province for the province as a whole and for municipalities. And it means we need to prepare for that. We are not ready yet and we need to prepare. We need to align our policies with the requirements of the Climate Change Act. The Act says that every organ of state that must make decisions or develop policies or have strategies, they must ensure that climate change is integrated into that. The establishment of provincial and district municipal forums on climate change need to be prioritized, because that would be the key cooperative governance structures that we have on a provincial level and also on a district level. Then in the MEC speech, she also alluded to this, that implementation of the Climate Change Act can lead to job creation in the green economy. So it's not all negative. There's a scope for new skills that can be developed and new jobs that can be created. And the important thing, number 5, is that we need to look at climate resilient infrastructure in the province, because we get a lot of damage on our infrastructure due to these extreme events. Building a climate resilient province will boost the economy, as damages and losses due to extreme weather events can be minimized. And I like this slide. I always show it because it makes you think. Our climate is changing, why aren't we? It was Einstein that says, is it the definition of, what was that? Wisdom. Definition of, but he said, if you do the same thing, but you expect a different result. What? Insanity. Is it insanity? The definition of insanity is you do the same thing, but you expect a different result every time. And that's what we're doing with climate change. We want to do the same thing, and we think, no, it won't be so bad. But it is bad. The climate is changing, so why aren't we? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tarina. You're posing a very critical question, that climate is changing. Why can't we? And we further go on to say, we do the same thing and expect different results. I'm of the view that participants indeed heard you properly. So we are now going to discuss that we are appreciating the fact that climate is indeed changing. Now we are going to answer, why aren't we changing? I think the base of discussion should really be intriguing participants to really answer at least the bare minimum that specific question. We will be assisting. So I will get an indication from the IT on the platform, the hands that would be there, and we continue to encourage them to can always participate through the chat group that is there on the platform. They can write, and we will indeed read their submissions if they wish to do so. But those that are raising their hands will take them to participate and log them in. So by show of hands, I'm going to take the side of hands that wishes to contribute. The with the yellow shirt will be number 1, followed by the brother at the back with the Scotch MMC, and the good self will be the 4th. Okay. and you will be the fifth. Like other rounds, I cannot run lazy. I like many rounds. So given an opportunity, I'll still come back if there are hands. But I'm looking at the time. There was an attempt that we try and push as many presentations before lunch, so that by the time we go to lunch, we really would have attempted to complete, which now looking at the time, I doubt it's possible. But let's give it a benefit of a doubt. We'll see it when we arrive there. The first hand, maybe if we have a roving mic. Okay, yes, thanks. You can shoot.
Thank you. My name is Simeon. I'm from the Indigenous Knowledge Systems Center at the Northwest University. Thanks a lot, Tharina, for the presentation. It was clear and very eye-opening. I'll make a comment and then maybe ask you to just make an input to it. I listened to a lot of these vulnerability and risk assessments. But what I see as a missing link is the assessment of the cultural risks and the vulnerability associated with climate change. Because in the context that we are talking of, in the province, for example, most of our population is actually based in rural areas. And in those areas, there is a lot of culture attached to it. And the way the people respond to climate change and the way they are going to adapt is going to depend on that a lot. We also know that the response to climate change is gendered. It's gender affects of this response a lot, or the impacts are gendered, especially in these rural areas. Studies are showing, for example, that climate change, one of the risks that we sit with in climate change is the loss of indigenous ways of livelihood. Another one is that there is erosion of this traditional knowledge, indigenous knowledge, of this very environment and weather and so on. And that climate change is impacting that a lot and is affecting that, and how now the people are going to adapt. So my question is, and you see earlier, I think when the national presentation was made, the director here indicated that she thinks that the national act is not emphasizing on this indigenous knowledge, which I think is a true observation. And you can see in the policy also that it skews away from this cultural dimension. So my question to you is, what do you think about this issue? Because I'm seeing this now as a gap. Was it that the assessment that you did not specify these aspects, or it was just an oversight? Because I think it's very critical that this dimension should be taken along in the policy when we are drafting. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, number two. The back.
Dumelang colleagues, my name is Kumo Fagu from the Department of Human Settlements. Dumelang colleagues, my name is Kumo Fagu from the Department of Human Settlements. I just wanted to find out from any expert that knows probably how much greenhouse gas emissions is being contributed by agricultural livestock farming, and how will that be related to human activities, just like cities, because in my experience, or when I see most of the media broadcasts that speak to climate change, agriculture and livestock farming has a contribution with methane gas emissions. But I've never seen a study that counts how much humans fart, which is also a cumulative methane gas that is produced within cities. How much of that gas emission produced by human activities or development, human settlements development, has been studied and attributed to climate change as well, because it seems like and as well the other risk and vulnerability hasn't been identified as city spatial planning or land use development, because I do not know why. Because of probably we want to remain as humans that are developing further into cities and contributing to the ideals of densification, rather than accepting that the idea of urban sprawl is a fallacy, probably or probably not. That would be my question and my other submission. Thank you, Chairperson.
Yeah, thank you. I think the third was the MMC. I'm looking at the program and I was listening to your questions. I just hope, I'm like you, would want expert to answer, but I'm looking at the next presentation in line with your question. But I'm just hoping that I'm not wrong, but in an event the answer is there, they will do so. But if it's to come on the presentation, the next presentation will also allow it to be like that. Thank you.
No, thank you, Chairperson. The presentation that was made you know, when the event we held in the morning, the participant could not even sing national anthem. Then I said to them, because I was the one who was chairing, is it climate change that makes you not to sing you are not active to sing the national anthem? Now, Chair, the last message or the last view, ne? People are not changing, but the climate change is changing. We are changing, but in wrong doing things. Now it's my view. We are changing, but not correctly as human beings by doing wrong things. Now, last key issue, agriculture. Yes, indeed, affected in agriculture, because agriculture, highest stand alone. When we eat, it's part of tourism. Agriculture, it's part of economy also. Unlike the mines, because the mine dinale the lifespan. Agriculture another lifespan, because we're eating almost every day. If agriculture to assist our farmers the situation the climate change, the drought, the worms that really the farmer really the SMMEs affecting the rain, too much of rain, and our economy goes down. They keep on coming to government and say, assist. While thank you, Chairperson.
number 4.
Hello, everyone. I'm Mr. Matiwa from Dr. Kenneth Kaunda. I'm a civil and activist in climate change. I'm in a civil organization. Director, I want to tell you one thing. You said why we don't change our lives. What I want to emphasize one thing. When department will come on board as a civil society and organization to work hand in hand to fight the mitigation of climate change, we will see where we're going. As long the government is not supporting civil organization, we will suffer. Hear our voices. Come on board. Let's do the collaboration. Let's sign MOUs, MOA with the government to even institution to say where we are here. We are willing to help all the thing of climate change. So we must act now. I was in G20. We said to the President, talk with our provincial government to listen to our organization, civil organization. So today's 23. We are going back in our district. I know we are going to be called again saying there is a workshop, but in the ground there is nothing happening. So let's come together and push this thing, help each other. Thank you.
Thank you, number 5.
Good day, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Katlego Matladi, and I'm from an organization by the name of UniFSA. So I'm just going to give you guys a little bit of background regarding UniFSA. It's a career and planning development platform. So we are an EdTech company, which is an educational technologically based company. So in terms of career planning, we assist learners from as early as grade 8 up until grade 12 with career planning. Career planning is essentially those learners understanding that the subject that they are currently doing at school can eventually filter into the courses that they'll be studying post-matric. So with grade 8 and grade 9, it's all about subject selection into preparation for high school subjects. Knowing that they will be falling off that syllabus of doing 9 subjects and getting into the syllabus of doing 7 subjects. But they need to also align those subjects with the streams, which is whether it's going to be scientifically based or is it going to be economically based, whether you're going to do commerce subjects or you're going to be doing science-related subjects, right? Then when you get to grade 12, is then that we initiate directly applications to those institutions that they qualify for, namely being universities and as well as TVET colleges. Then we also assist them with bursary providers, right? So with that being said, we are true custodians of representing the voiceless, which is we are the speakers of the youth itself, that we see that beneficiaries are not even here, which are the future of tomorrow, but we don't even have them present in order for them to come and hear about the sustainability and environmental conservation that we guys currently having conversation about. And these are the youth that we should be actually exercising the fact of they are the ones that we're supposed to be taking care of our country, which is our economy, in the next coming future, right? So with that being said, we also assist learners that pursue the expos, whereby they enter into competition in order to come up with positive initiatives in order to change the world that we're currently living in. So I'm just going to take it back a little bit. There was a young boy by the name of Rautsepa Romani who was involved in the Science Expo 2 years consecutively now, which was 2024 and as well as 2025 last year. 2024, Rautsepa Romani managed to win, is it a bronze? Yeah, it's a bronze medal at the ESCOM Science Expo with his invention of the water conservation system that he recently built himself. And post that year, he even, 2025 actually, he also went into the competition again with the same project. But what he did, he heightened the project up and revamped it in order for it to function the way that he wanted to function because of, firstly, it had deviations, it had defaults actually, whereby he had to save up money in order to buy sensors. How that water conservation system works, you guys can also understand the level of wastage of water in primary schools and in high schools. Let me just say in schools generally. So how that water conservation system works is that once you put a cup or maybe a bottle of this, like this, in front of the tap, the sensor senses that bottle, but immediately as it senses that bottle, then the water eventually comes out of the tap. But as soon as you move that bottle or that cup out of the tap, that's when the water does what? It stops automatically. So what I'm basically saying is that we don't want to see those type of projects being just like something that you put in the shelf, being outdated and being a decoration there at home, but not having the proper backing in terms of making that product accessible for the entire schools that we have in South Africa. And you know how water wastage is in the nation that we're currently living in, right? Then my question is that to Ms. Bishop Tarina, is there any plan to translate the smart project outcomes into like simplified learning modules for high school learners in especially agricultural subjects? Like for instance, creating climate smart agricultural school programs, or even school-based demo plots, or as well as learners as data collectors for local climate patterns as well, or either linking agricultural subject learners to the extension of the officers themselves. Right? So this message need to be tailored down to the level of these learners so that they can properly understand it. So is there any plan actually that translate the smart project outcomes into simplified learning modules for high school learners? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Maybe can we get an indication if there's anything on the platform? A hand to ask or okay. I'm seeing the afterthought hand before the response, Tarina. Are there any other hands before we close? Okay. All right. You'll be after him. I've also reconsidered on many rounds. I think one will do. All right. After him, we'll now take answers, then we'll go to the next presentation. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Chairperson, for granting me the opportunity. My name is Tsepo Mohali from Matlosana Municipality. I'm from an organization called the Greenland Environment and Nature Conservationist. So on the slide that was presented, I'm much interested in the high risk of waste management because that's a concern that we are facing. And I just want to point this thing out since, well, we're having government officials in this room. One of the issues that we're having, we ran a research visiting dumping site, trying to check what's actually happening. Because I think the presenter did mention that when you ask people about climate change, they do know what climate change is. But now the action as to respond is actually different. So this is what I want government officials to bear in mind. The problem that we have in our communities is that we are having people not educated in terms of waste segregation. So when you go to this dumping site, you will get waste that the municipality doesn't collect at all. I'm doing my garden, and municipality cannot take my waste garden. I've just built a 2-room behind my house, and the municipality cannot take the building rubble. And so these are type of waste that you will find in our illegal dumping sites. So as we are creating the climate change response strategy and the implementation plan, I think we need to bear in mind the causes of as to how does it come for people to actually be dumping and what's happening in our dumping site. Most people, they see hotspot, but we don't understand the real cause of it, Because I mean, if I have a dustbin in my yard, the municipality doesn't come to collect it, and now I'm stuck with a dustbin. It means I'm stuck with a problem. That's when you get people dumping it in whatever open spaces. So I would like to a bit challenge the officials here as to say, let us look at the root cause. What causes the illegal dumping site? Why are we having such high risk of illegal dumping? I think it is the issue of not having the right solid waste management plan as to ensure that we even educate our communities. We are sitting here, you know, and our communities are not actually that much represented and not having a say in terms of policy making. And that's why we are here to actually saying this is the current status quo of what is happening. Maybe if we can have a way to separate our waste from source before we can actually dispose it. Now we are having, or we are heading towards a solution. So I just wanted to put it out there so that when we go and refine and rebuild, and then we know what to put in our heads as much as waste management is concerned. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. The last speaker. I think those are great points, Ms. Boshoff.
Good afternoon. I would like to respond to the question that was asked regarding the contribution of agriculture. My name is Tipindori Malala. I'm from Department of Agriculture and Rural Development in the Northwest. So in the inventory of greenhouse gas emission, agriculture is contributing approximately 7% of the total greenhouse gas emission in South Africa. And majority of it is emitted from the feedlots. So we started around 2019, we started a project for those farmers who are keeping their livestock in a kraal in their yards to harvest, to take those cattle down. And we do the biodigester. You take those cattle down and you dump it, you soak it in a biodigester. That when it brews, it releases that methane gas, and those people are using that gas to cook in their homes. We have got 5 projects in Greater Town. We have got 5 projects in Zirast, and we have got Bujanala. We have got 5 projects as well that they are currently running. Unfortunately, part of it is where these farmers are, the challenge is water. They cannot, because if you don't have water, you cannot brew this cattle dung to produce this methane gas. So it becomes a challenge. Then those stuff, if you want to visit those projects, you are welcome. We can take you there to visit those projects, to visit those farmers who are using those biodigester machines to produce methane gas for cooking in their homes. So it is really sustainable. The only challenge that we are struggling with is availability of water in those municipalities. So people are struggling, but those that are having water in their yards, the farmers today as we speak, they are using those methane gas stoves to cook. And if it was done in a larger scale, we are intending to increase in a larger scale, at least to reduce this methane gas that is emitted and go to the space, and then it causes the global warming or the climate change, as we said. So that, in short, when I'm responding to that, that is the contribution of agriculture. It's not necessarily only the feedlot. Even when we are using fertilizers and other agricultural inputs, like fertilizer like can or limestone ammonium, when you are fertilizing, the nitrogen is emitted to the space if it is not properly utilized. So now we are it's just a matter of balancing act between, you need to balance between what you do and what you're intending to reap from the ground. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A round of applause for the answer. Yeah, yeah. It proves that we are all now participating. Let's invite Terena to come and respond to the question posed.
There was a question from Simeon from IKS Northwest University. What I just want to indicate is that IKS is indeed a valuable way of collecting data and trying to see how we can respond to climate change. And it didn't necessarily come out in this presentation because in the risk and vulnerability assessment, it was more on an assessment of the sectors. So IKS is not a sector, it's a way of how you can respond to some challenges in a sector. And in our draft climate change strategy and implementation plan, the IKS issues will definitely come out. It was raised in all our district workshops that we had when we developed, or we wanted inputs on the implementation plan. So we hope that it will be elaborated on when we have the breakaways tomorrow. But what I also want to highlight is the National Department is planning to have a sort of a conference specifically on IKS in Northwest, and it's a follow-up on the session we had last year. Some of you might have been there. We had the National Department came here to with a roadshow that they do in all the provinces to see what information there is related to IKS and climate change. So there will be a follow-up. We have a dedicated conference on IKS. I think the second of Department of Human Settlements was responded to by my colleague from DART, and just to say that that information that he was referring to is in our greenhouse gas emission inventory of Northwest, which was also published in 2021. So that information is there. The challenge that we experienced was that we only could find commercial data, commercial census data from Stats SA. So there is a bit of a challenge to get data for the agriculture sector related to greenhouse gas emissions. MMC from Moses Kutani, I think you basically made comments. Did I miss a question? Don't think I heard a question there. Okay. Mr. Matiba was requesting that the department should come on board to assist civil organizations, maybe have a MOA. And one of the actions that we are putting in the climate change response strategy and implementation plan is to develop a proper communication plan, how we can reach communities and associations. At this stage, I must just say upfront, unfortunately, that the capacity in the department is low at this stage. So maybe that's why you also don't see us everywhere. But the MEC has undertaken to increase the capacity in the department to fulfill the function of climate change. So hopefully it will improve in the future. Then there was Katlefo Mutladi that talked about the career and development planning platform. And you wanted to know, are there plans to, are there modules to help the learners to hear these issues? And I think that I'll leave that to my chief director to respond to, because there is Department of Education. They are working together to see what environmental issues must be worked into the modules for Department of Education, but she can add to that. And then Tseko from Maklusana
we're talking about the waste, the high risk of the waste management sector. The challenge is that you can have as many plans as you want. I mean, there's a Waste Act, there's Integrated Waste Management Plan, there's a National Waste Management Strategy, which gives you all the right things to do. But it's the implementation thereof that it's always a challenge. And probably it's linked to awareness raising, also the root cause on what are we doing if we don't manage our waste properly. So I think the plans are there and the legislation is there, but it's the awareness and the willingness of stakeholders and communities to participate and make sure that we address it properly. I think that was the last question. Am I correct? Yes. And then, my chief director can.
Thank you very much, Mayor Bosov. In terms of the question that was raised, I think we still need more support in terms of developing such kind of modules. However, indeed, in terms of the mandate of the department, we work in collaboration with the Department of Education, specifically in terms of integration. The idea is that we should not try to separate environment from everything else that is happening because it's integrated. So we want to see the footprint of environmental knowledge and understanding in every subject that is offered within the level or the platform of the Department of Education in terms of the curriculum and the syllabus. But I'm going to outrightly say that we have picked up again that we recently, as a department, had an engagement with one of the sitters, the head sitter, which is housing the mandate of conservation within the sectors that they are supporting. And I must say that they have limited material when it comes to conservation. And I had to touch on issues of water conservation, which at the time when we were talking, I immediately took note of you to say that maybe we need to engage on that, because the discussion ended up by saying that they need more people who can assist them to come up with material or modules that they can then support as the sitter, so that we're able to develop more skills out there, even if it's not at the level of formal education, but the skills that we need as communities on the ground. Yeah, so we will exchange contact numbers so that we're able to link you up with relevant people as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think what we are all appreciating, Metarina and Chief Director, is the fact that climate change in its nature is a very sensitive subject. And as a province, we are mindful of the fact that we are struggling to really, and I mean as the province in the true sense of it, including our communities, to take the subject in question serious for what it is. And it also continues to prove itself on our provincial government at this stage. We would have spoken to strategic partners nationally, but we are saying as well as the province, when you budget for it, I mean the response, just the response matter, and I'm mindful of the fact that both the HOD and MECs are not here. I was called to be a program director, not but to be limited from just appreciating that as well as the department, your budgeting really leaves a lot to be desired as a provincial government to really tackle the subject in question. But the NEC tries their utmost best, MMC, to have us as a team such that our planning speaks to the real challenge on the ground and we are able to respond to it, including our local municipality budgets. Because this is not just but a battle that can be left both to the provincial and national government. The speech of the MEC does appreciate the fact that as intergovernmental stakeholders, department, 3 spheres of government, if you join hands, we'll be able at least to get closer to the solution. But as well, the structures that are there in localities, we from localities as well as municipalities, we must encourage them and try. I've seen the ones from my municipality, for an example, that we must be one, such that as we engage provincial government from various municipalities, we all of us are one and understand the need on the ground, so that when we get to speak to both the HOD and the MEC, at least there's something tangible from the ground and we are speaking as a unit. But as we approach them from different spheres, it's going to affect the impact. Changes might be there, funding might be there to various stakeholders, to various organizations. But what is of critical importance at this point is the impact that we will make together, both government and private sector and those strategic stakeholders, others that we have. Thank you very much. Can we once more give Metarina Boshoff a round of applause for presentation and answering questions. Time before me, it's 13:40, 20 to 2, and the program suggested that at least in 5 minutes time we'll be breaking for lunch, but we have not moved to my satisfaction. If the House allows me, I'll plead that we've just returned from that comfort break. Perhaps we take the last presentation before lunch. Are we agreeable to that proposal, colleagues? Okay. All right. Now we'll have tourism, greening and climate change by Ntate Nzimande from Department of Tourism. Thank you.
Greetings to yourself, Program Director. I wasn't sure how to greet you, Program Director, because you're wearing multiple hats. There is a political head that I must also acknowledge as I move to accordingly acknowledge the MSCs who are in our midst. Let me also recognize the traditional authority. I grew up in a rural area, so I relate to indigenous practices and I still embrace them. Let me also recognize in our midst academia, who are very critical in ensuring that the scientific repository as knowledge informs our decision going forward. I will also recognize colleagues from my former area, which is local government, if they are here, because they are very critical, because all that we are discussing here, if it's got no platform to be implemented and embraced, it will be a futile exercise. But let me quickly start with a discomforting fact. Program Director and your Honorable MSCs, or MMCs, yes, thank you. Thanks for correcting me.
Just that people will be saying MMCs. We are not MMCs. MMCs, we are MECs, Member of Executive Committee.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I hope the technology was recording that analysis. It's going to be very critical going forward. Let me quickly discomfort all of you. In 100 years, Program Director, most of us, if not all, will not be here. In 100 years. In 50 years, very few will be here. In 25 years, maybe a quarter of the house will be here. With that said, the fact is, now coming back to the initial presentation, if you fail to manage change, change will manage you. And when change is managing you, you will have very rigid flexibility. And I'm calling it rigid flexibility because it will be rigid, but you will be expected to be flexible. So, climate change is compelling us to manage the change proactively, because if we fail to manage it, then that's and it becomes an emergency. I will not dwell much on what is in front of you is the first slide, because I think it was adequately covered by our colleague from National. So this is a legislative premise. Maybe if you could go back to the first slide, which just gives a scope, so that I spend more time on the scope, go backwards. I think it's the second slide. Thank you. This is the essence of the presentation. Tourism, climate and change, the legislative premise. It's a list of all these policies, acts, which we've made reference to, but I will only touch on the ones that relates to tourism in the interest of time. We did not only look at these policies in isolation, but we said, what is it that we are doing as tourism? And that will be covered by the change response, tourism response to climate change. We have also put together a plan because we had to be systematic and also bite what we can chew. So the TEIP comprise of the steps that we have taken to address this, because to us this is not a new phenomenon. Climate change has been impacting the sector for a very long time, and this is now manifesting in disasters along coastal cities, but there is a lot that has been done. We'll then recommend, based on what we've done and what we think is possible, but I'll also be touching on some of the questions that were raised earlier, which I felt will be covered in some of this presentation. Next slide, please. Next. Am I in charge? Can I? Okay, thank you. The very first part talks to the latest policy shift that we have done as a sector. Because if you recall earlier on, it was specific that the Climate Act, which is the last on your screen, deals with directing specific sectors to develop what relates to their sector. Our white paper responded by laying the groundwork for this promotion of climate and how they align to strategies. And we're just making a reference of all these legislative laws which have been in place, which led us to, as early as 2011, have a national climate said, it's got focal and focus areas. One of the focus areas is the level of exposure. We're very exposed as a sector, directly or indirectly. And these are just examples. Your sea level, you find a lot of coastal destinations now finding it difficult to attract hotels to build along the coast because the coastal belt is shrinking. They're also facing a lot of operational expenses, high increase in terms of insurance, because insurances are saying you're vulnerable, therefore the cost of insuring you should be equivalent to your vulnerability. So these are realities of climate change facing specific sectors. I think the impact of emission in the air travel, which is not only the key example, but in the sector, there's a lot. Also in the protected areas, we find that there are a number of waste programs that we have to implement, including capacity building. So we have, to an extent that we have identified waste management, and we're intending to develop an incubation that looks into specifically what type of waste is prevalent in the sector and what products can be created. And I like what I saw outside, and I think it will be covered in my last slide. Mainly the purpose of response is to ensure that tourism sector responds rapidly and effectively. Rapidly and effectively. Why those two keywords? If you don't respond rapidly and effectively, other destinations will respond effectively and rapidly, and you will lose the market to them. So that's why it was so critical for us to adjust and adapt. And you would see that we later say, in response to the impact of climate change, we then had a National Tourism Climate Change Program Response and Climate Change Action Plan as early as 2011. So we are improving on it, and we are learning from platforms like these ones. And vulnerability, I was excited to say that it's of medium impact, as a province, but it can be improved. Next slide. what our executive authority, be it Minister or TM, we always have a sustainable village. And a sustainable village comprises of products that are produced mainly from either recycled or processed waste. And we are trying by all means to look at what products are made from what type of waste and where is the major source of that type of waste to deal with the programs that were raised by MEC earlier on of dumping as well as illegal waste exposure. Sometimes you get seepage leaking into protected areas and you lose the biodiversity. But what we have failed is to manage the waste. Maintenance of climate change, messaging and positioning is very key. I would like the province to always emphasize the medium impact that they have made reference to, because that is a key statement that communicates to environmental enthusiasts that as a province, this is your status when it comes to climate change and waste management, as opposed to other provinces. So that could be your core competence. You might not have the ocean, but your status in terms of environmental climate change posture positions you somewhere. Responsible tourism is the future. If you are not developing your products and hoping to attract the world and also hoping to contribute to sustainable living, we will not be part of you. You need to have social well-being in your conceptualization. You also need to think economic growth. There's a lot of economy. Let me give an example about some of the programs we are doing linked to economic growth. We are looking at specific waste from protected areas, and we are looking at waste management as a practice, and to develop enterprises that are processing that type of waste. And when you have an incubation, funds are not a problem if you have a solution to a prevailing problem. And most of the time we look at it and we frame it differently. We think money first and then we are blocked because we don't have money. But if you are solving a prevalent problem, you will always get resources. Environmental preservation based on a viable economic activity that solves the problem. So if you look at that cycle now, it says your well-being will be improved and be good because you are practicing economic activities that are environmentally sensitive. So that cycle deals with a change that you see in the middle, which we call sustainable tourism. And that is a responsible approach in new products that we are developing, be it innovative, be it technology, be it creativity, or be it the research we are conducting. Next slide. Now, what is it that we have done? I think that's the key part. To reduce tourism-related greenhouse gas emissions, these are the following measures. We have done, go back a bit. So for us, resource efficiency is the whole value chain of the efficiency from source to supply and everything. Recap assessments we've conducted with the objective of identifying, I don't want to read, you can read, but we've also done to determine water and electricity waste, as you can see. But we are now establishing assessment to provide establishment has been assessed with the resource efficiency and their recommendations. You can go to the next slide. It's the challenges of technology. Next slide, please. Also reflecting that we started in 2019 here to do the resource efficiency program where we trained unemployed youth. So that's the opportunity for young people. The net was a bit wider at the time. We took 180, but 30 were from the very same province we are in. Trainees were placed in their workplace, which sometimes are state-owned facilities, preferably, but not limited to them. We currently have 25 in the cohort. We're doing this with CSIR as our implementer. But we have since looked at this as a very critical resource because it determines the sustainability of every tourism enterprise. If I'm able to come into your hotel at no cost to you, we pay for them as a department, and I analyze your wastage, and I can give it a figure, cost it. And usually what we find is that that analysis will lead to a reduction which will enable the placed cadet to find a job. So from the savings that they can determine in the business, they are able to create a job for themselves and still save organizations money. So we now want to increase this number to 450 so that each and every province will have a cohort of about 50. But we're now modifying this approach and saying we want to infuse entrepreneurship also in their whole course, because we want them to start their own businesses, because we can't place them all in government employment, but also we can't place them all in state-owned entities. But if they are entrepreneurs themselves, they can now expand beyond the tourism, go to schools, apply the same approach, go to hospitals. So this, for us, is an innovative idea that will really save but still create opportunities. Next one. Next slide, please. Still continuing with the Green Tourism Incentive Program. It looks into the partial grant funding, where, for example, it's up to 1 million. We will not charge you for diagnosing the problem. We will also not charge you for devising a plan. We will cost it for you. But the grant is up to 1 million. So if the solution that is devised based on the assessment is less than 1 million, also depending on case by case, because they look at you, you might find that you will not be paying anything for migrating from mainstream water supply or electricity to clean tourism incentive. But also, the administration of this, because it's not managed generally, managed by NEF, but this one in particular is managed by ITC. Currently, the window is closed, but if you go on our website on a regular basis, but we also share with the provinces when this is now open. Next slide. This is just also a continuation of the interventions that we have designed, looking at the specific programs where we have today 32 sites, parks, reserves across the country, others and others, plans back. I'm sure you relate to some of these destinations, but the essence is the same. Go in there, look at what adaptation is required. If there is a need to manage a particular trend that has been depicted, proactively manage it, like the dongas in some of the protected areas, but also the waste management where they bury certain acidic, close to protected areas for seepage. So the lifespan, because that land can no longer be utilized for agriculture, that land can never be utilized for any industrial purposes because you've buried something that cannot be processed to adhere to the green and the greening as an economy going forward. Next slide. It's a bit slow. I had also the mentioning of education and the collaboration. We are working very closely with education department and DSEC for that particular purpose. It is very in Zulu. I am Zulu, but I know that there will be something in your language that says the same thing. We say Lukozwalu Semans, meaning exactly that. If you fail to do this at an early age, you run the risk of society that does not take kindly to some of the new methods. But if you introduce them early through education and training, through specific programs that are biodiversity or conservation, as the name of the department for the provincial, but also infuse them as part of working conditions for the intents that we are placing in different destinations, but also the important part is to have communities embracing these methods as underscored the importance of communication and outreach programs, which this is one of the platforms, but also intergovernmental coordination, as this cannot be achieved by one department acting on its own, because it's got a lot of components. There is an environmental sensitive component, there is an economic development component, but also there are components that talks to knowledge. How best do we preserve certain knowledge so that when we devise these interventions, they make sense? Next slide. I will be sharing this presentation, but going forward, we are looking at tourism environmental implementation plan that's going to last us from 2025 to 2030. The draft includes what you see in front, which is the environmental management coordination mechanism. How do we coordinate ourselves? But also energy efficiency in the tourism sector. What alternative energy sources? I was actually laughing when you made the analogy about the methane. I have a prototype of the methane that was developed by an entrepreneur from a rural area, and I can show you how it's done. Indeed, you just need cow dung and water. Those are the only two, and you produce gas that you can use to cook for your guests when you've got load shedding. And how best is that for rural tourism and cultural tourism? And the documentation of indigenous knowledge as part of the practice. So some of these things are there, but there is no formal recognition and documentation, so that there is a central repository as a source of reference for economic activities. Reduce the waste generated by the tourism sector. That's why we're now putting together a view of a specific incubation that talks to waste management, the mobilization of support for the implementation. That's why we are here, because we want you to know that as a sector, there are specific things we are looking for that aligns to climate change, but there are also economic opportunities that could be derived from aspiring or from working towards that in the process, which addresses your local economic challenges of unemployment and also the cleanliness of your province and the city. We also want to make sure that whatever we do adapts to modern trends, and that's why this will be the key. The draft has been approved. We're now at the consultation stage, and that for us is a very critical part, because we get to test whether our assumptions are practical or are relevant or are modern enough or embraces the current technology or also considers the innovation that has been developed in the world globally. Next slide. I think the next part is just a recommendation, if I'm not correct. Yes, it is. We want to improve climate change awareness across the sector, especially at community level, so that as we talk about what is it that is climate change, we are also conscientizing people about what is simply because that local municipality is small enough not to afford to do a business intelligence case that is fundable from any if they lose opportunity. So the focus should be on smaller, but it must be based on the core competencies. If you've got competencies that will enhance the sector. I think I've spoken about the operational expenses, a burden to adapt to modern change, which is why we are looking at collaboration, but also the Tourism Adaptation Fund is something that we also put in
case like that of the former Minister of Higher Education. I'm not quite certain where is he now in terms of the department sending appeals to be Mr. Zimande as well with the name plate. I just hope it's just a coincident surnames. I'm saying this because I'm happy with one or two things in your presentation. One thing about me, I always say, even on other structures that I serve in, that are outside parameters of my province, I'm very jealous of the rural province of the Northwest. That's why, unlike many of my friends at my age, I never have a vehicle with a number plate GP, because I'm very proud to have been born in this rural districts of the Northwest province. The former premier of this province would never say Northwest, but rather at all material times say that they are better. And that's the program where let's go back in Mapi. And that is because we are proud of this province. I am, however, particularly worried to the department that the invite does not speak to what we are getting. The grant, for an example, that Zimande speaks about. I'm worried about the attendance and how we are also responding to. I'm not sure of the platform. I'm saying to those with real interest of the grants, for an example, that Zimande is speaking about. I'm worried about the audience and the interest to that. But we'll speak about that with the department. And of course, the MEC. I'll just make an example, Chief Director. You know that I received the invite last night. Hence, I'm raising the organizing of an event of this magnitude. The audience really leaves a lot to be desired. But time in that Zimande, maybe if you join hands together also, and make sense to the department with regard to the funding towards metros. I completely agree with you. I mean, the metros, MMC, you came with your car here, you know. The ones of metros are driven. We're not crying for that. Get me right. The MMCs for metros are driven equal vehicles to those of the MCs. It's because of the resources that are before them. We're appreciating that fact. And we'll have to push very hard national department to bring resources where they are really needed. We will engage with them before allocations are made, and we advance to the best interest of these rural provinces. So after the presentation, colleagues, we are going to take hands both on the platform and here. And if we can be quick, because I'm mindful of the time, I'm sure the health department will start complaining with the food if it stays long. There are also those laws. Someone will be sick and tomorrow the department will have to pay something. You'll be speaker number one. Okay. And I'll get indication from the IT with regard to the platform and see if there are any submissions. You can show the value.
Thank you very much for the question. I think in the plenary that there is the second, MMC will be the third, you will be the fourth, at the back, you will be the fifth. Yeah, and that is the last round. Yeah, okay. Thank you very much.
batla MMC go tsenya ka point le tsomo group ile gore other municipalities and exchanging the ideas of what they want to create their new facilities. E batla ba go tsenya chief director e batla tsenya MMC group ya MMC. propose that is Mandela Margit or Atimobile happy. Are we fine with him studying? Okay. Thank you very much. I think that was the list, and there is no one closing outside. Can I get an indication that was still right on the platform? No hands that are up.